Hello? Lately, I've been thinking a lot about Serial Experiments Lain. It's hard to come up with another example of a piece of media that's impacted me so completely. And it's something I kind of can't put into words, just like its ideas about isolation and some of the reflexive themes still rattle around in my head even now. It's starting to feel like the series is maybe more present in Western pop culture now than it has been since its release. Stories about weird girls on the internet just seem to hit different in the modern context. And I think Lain hung around because it's a work that really sticks with people. And I don't really have the mental bandwidth to unpack the Lain pilled thing, but it seems as sure a sign as any that people are really connecting with the series.
Lain.
I mean, what better figure to represent a growing nostalgia and interest in the early 2000s tech and internet culture than the Blueprint herself? But all this isn't new, right? Lain has always been a virus in people's heads. Just look at all the fan projects that have been made. You think Fake is getting the same treatment? You don't see people talking about being alpha pilled. Okay, I'm not really someone who buys auteur theory as it's sold. I think creative work exists as the sum of many people's input. But at the same time, Serial Experiments Lain is this sort of moment in which a team of creative powerhouses came together, and from then on they continued to work with each other on a bunch of different projects. If you were fishing for some kind of YouTube title or something, you could call them the big three, even though that's not even true. And also it sucks and you're a loser. So that's kind of what I'm driving at here. This video covers a whole lot of ground. It's really winding. I'm just talking about the things that caught my attention as I kind of dug into this hole. I'm painting a picture, you know, in really broad strokes. So yeah. Yoshitoshi Abe in much of the 90s worked primarily making doujin and doing freelance illustration, but thanks to him creating an online portfolio at a time when that's a fairly novel concept, Abe gets hired to work as a character designer and artist on Serial Experiments Lain. Okay, I have to stop myself already. I kind of buried the lead here. If you know enough about the topic, you've probably caught on. It would be much more accurate to describe the creation of Serial Experiments Lain as a process conducted by 4 key figures, not 3. We're forgetting to give producer Yasuyuki Ueda his flowers for his involvement. Please applaud. In truth, much of the initial conception of the Serial Experiments Lain project can be attributed to Ueda, who drafted the 3 figures to work under Triangle's staff on the project. I don't even have a good reason not to include him, it's just that he wasn't part of my plan, and 3 feels like a more complete number, I guess. Ueda is actually the one who came across Abe's portfolio online and reached out to him to work on Lain. And Lain was already a really risky venture, you know? It's just like this super ambitious project, but even still, it's cool to see that Abe was pulled in because of this, you know, online portfolio, especially when you consider that Ueda was not super established on his own as a producer either. I guess you could infer that Ueda was really certain in Abe's ability, which is kind of a cute narrative, you know? But at the same time, Abe was very new to this line of work. In interviews, he even mentioned that he really didn't know how the process worked, which is pretty wild considering how well it turned out. Abe and Ueda are probably the 2 who worked most closely post-Lain, with Ueda and Triangle staff not only looking to Abe for art direction, but story and original concepts too. You can kind of get this picture of Ueda scouting this young and upcoming talent, and then keeping him under the producer's wing for multiple projects. Ueda hasn't even really produced anything in the last 10 years, at least not directly. From what I can see on Twitter, he plays Fortnite and makes AI art, which I mean, I guess that's cool. Hot off the success of Lain, Ueda taps Abe to work on a project that would hopefully be less depressing to make. That product being Nia Under 7, an adaptation of Abe's manga run of the same series. There's a lot you can say about Nia Under 7, and honestly it would be smarter to direct you to a more well-made video on it, especially considering how recently it was made. I've linked Hazel's video in the description, which has a really well done section on Nia Under 7. Please check it out. What I really want to dig into is what Ueda and Abe pulled off after that. Haibane Renmei, originally written as a doujin title by Abe, was adapted into an anime series in 2002 with Ueda producing, and Abe getting his first writing credit on an animated series. I think Abe's character work really shines when in conversation with his own writing. These 2 aspects to the production really combine into a unique synthesis, and the story of Raka and Reki's lives in Old Home clarified to me how both really inform each other. It's just like Abe's unique art style is that of stories like these, with the core of Haibane Renmei Renmei's story being about accepting the change in your life that's for the better and coming to terms with the happiness you're afforded. I think we really see Abe stitch that into the fabric of the show. I love the attention to detail paid to the textiles in the series also. One of the things I love is when there's just a little bit of detail about what and why the characters wear what they wear. A lot of the concept of Renmei, especially the setting, is inspired by the end of the world portions of
Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World by
What really interests me is that Hard-Boiled Wonderland takes a lot of cues from the hard-boiled literary genre, you know, with the aggressive masculine protagonist and the damsel, and usually there's like crime, you know, the pulp stuff. But as these like tropes kind of travel through Murakami's novel and into Haibane Renmei, the conventions become warped. A genre, you know, wholly uninterested in the emotional becomes fuel for this work about introspection and emotional vulnerability, but we hang on to the fun mystery parts. Honestly, I could maybe gush about the series forever, but as for analysis, I think there isn't really much of value to say. A lot of Haibane Renmei's heart is on its sleeve, and it's kind of a story that hits close to home, meaning that if you want analysis, you probably don't have to look far. And again, people could already analyze the series way better than I could. I think RomNex's video is really good. I linked that in the description also. If Lain is a series that gave me brainworms, then Haibane Renmei is a series that gave me heartworms. Or something. As for post-Renmei, you could maybe sum things up a little more succinctly. Abe's focus comes back to character design primarily, which means he hasn't really written for an animated project besides Haibane Renmei, which is a shame, you know. I think he's a really good writer, but I get it, you know. Why do all that when you could just stream on YouTube and hang out with your kids and draw a couple characters from time to time? Okay, so this is me from the future. I'm editing the first cut of the video right now. It is 2 a.m. and you know I'm watching other stuff while I'm editing, so I put on Housing Complex C, which is Abe's like most recent gig. It's like this Adult Swim produced Tooname exclusive whatever thing, so it's like made overseas, but they don't do the Japanese dub at all, so it's just English. And it's this like 4-part miniseries. I think it was supposed to run during October once a week, and this might be one of the most narratively incoherent things I've ever seen. Like, I cannot not include this in the video, so here I go. Okay, Housing Complex C is about Kimi Shirokado. It's like this little 9-year-old girl who lives in this housing complex with her mom, and it's like a retirement complex, I guess, so there's a lot of elderly tenants. And basically this nearby fishery takes on a group of new technical interns who move into the complex, and all the interns are also, there's like fish people somewhere, and I don't want to come across as like a narrative Luddite or something like that. I can appreciate something that breaks narrative structure or is more experimental, and it doesn't even need to be good. Like, I like a lot of stuff that is objectively not well made, you know. But like, this is just, it like, scenes do not track like logically. It's just a really bizarre story, and it uses like foreshadowing in these insane ways that make me feel like I'm losing my mind. I don't know what's going on, you know. I think that's what really is interesting about it. Like, if it just sucked in a way that made sense, I'd be cool with it, you know? I might even like it, but it's just so weird. Also, Abe's character designs like don't really fit the like tone of the show. It's kind of weird. Kanaka's early career involved a lot of writing and directing for Ultraman series, something his brother did with him often, as well as a slew of made-for-TV films. He wasn't really involved in a lot of animated projects until around 95, and a through line in his filmography is working around horror as a genre. Like, clearly the guy has a really deep appreciation for it, and I think that appreciation bleeds into his writing even when he's not trying to. And the work prior to Lain isn't the most relevant, but Alice in Cyberland is a really interesting example. Released just 3 years before Lain, it's another one of these multimedia projects, this one having a PlayStation 1 game attached to it, just like Serial Experiments Lain. And it's actually like a really interesting precursor to the Lain project. There's a lot of DNA that's shared between the two of them. Actually, like a little reference to Alice in Cyberland in Lain, with Alistri and Rena being the names of the girls in the main cast. What's most like striking is like there's a lot of difference in how we see the internet in these two different projects. projects, like Alice and her friends are chasing down cyber anarchists on behalf of the government, and that's almost like a complete 180 to how we see the internet in Serial Experiments Lain. You know, the government is kind of this force trying to take control of the Wired. And you know, I think a lot of people consider Kanaka's relationship to Serial Experiments Lain as like really distinct, with Kanaka's writing style being a key influence on why Serial Experiments Lain is the story that it is. And it's true, a lot of Kanaka's go-to writing themes are on display here, like technology, transhumanism, government conspiracy, homunculus, an interest in some like kind of baseline psychology concept. But again, what's unique is that Kanaka was brought on in the same way Abe was to work on Lain as a project. That isn't to say he didn't have an influence on how the story turned out, it's just that the project was not his conception, you know? I think it's easy to assume that Lain and Technolize exist as a pair. It helps that the subject matter is similar and they both have the Abe character design, but I think it's still important to consider all the things he worked on in that 5-year gap between the two. Technolize really feels like an expansive project. It really is an evolution on how large a story Kanaka can write, because it's just so dense, not just in the ideas Kanaka's trying to juggle here, but there is just so many details in this world that Kanaka's trying to sketch out for us. And that's the key, you know? I think it's fair to say that Technolize is definitely not as pervasive as Serial Experiments Lain, and obviously they don't need to be compared, they're different works, but you know, I think a big factor why, aside from like the hostile editing and direction of the series that I love, but I understand why people don't really. I think the reason why Technolize doesn't connect with more people is that you as a viewer have to really buy into this world that he made. It's sci-fi, but in a way that's so bleak and storied that I don't think it really captures people's hearts. This is a stacked production, you know? And I think the series gets close to accomplishing what it's really going for, you know? There are some issues. Also, I think it's relevant here to bring up that Kanaka really has trouble writing women. The cast here is like really flimsy, which is a shame because I think both Michiko and Eriko have really promising setups, and then they just fall flat when it matters. Also, like as a side note, I've been really obsessed with this documentary where they put Gact into the mainframe with CGI for the music video on the ED of the series. Like they hire a jewelry designer to design a chain so he can wear it in the CG video. Shadow over Innsmouth is a short story written by H.P. Lovecraft, 6 years prior to his death in 1937. Lovecraft, who has been sort of canonized as one of the forefathers of modern horror writing, wrote this story about a small isolated community who, as a result of intermingling with an underwater society of fish people, become these horrific monsters. Half man, half fish, wholly subject to the mental influence of some underwater monster god. And this isn't news, and I don't think it's really a reach to say that maybe this story reflects some negative character qualities of H.P. Lovecraft. This guy was a committed racist, and he had a really deep anxiety of mixed race relationships. And this isn't one of those situations where this guy gets better, right? Again, this was 6 years before he passed away. He was ride or die for these beliefs, you know? In 1992, aired on television, a made-for-TV adaptation of Shadow over Innsmouth, written and directed by Chiaki Konaka. It's fine as far as like a movie can go, it's really just transplanting the story into a Japanese setting. There's also some weird story tweaks that happen. Some of the editing and shot composition is actually pretty unique though. It's fine, you know, it's fun. Like I said earlier, Konaka is a self-established fan of horror. He's written horror fiction and nonfiction about the genre. Lovecraft is like a foundational inspiration for Konaka. The brand of horror attributed to him appears a lot in the things Konaka writes. I'd even say you see some of those undercurrents in Serial Experiments Lain, and I wonder how he contends with who Lovecraft is, you know? What Lovecraft believed in. I mean, if he even thinks about it at all, right? Okay, picture this. It is August 1st, 2021. You are a Digimon fanatic and you're standing in line on a hot Sunday afternoon in front of the beautiful Yokosuka Arts Theater. Maybe you ate at the Coco across the street earlier. You get in line ahead of time in order to get a good seat because it's Digimon Tamer's 20th anniversary, and much of the voice cast will be performing a stage play penned by the big man himself, the writer on the original Tamer series. You poor soul. Okay, now picture this. You are part of a group of honest, hardworking Digimon fan translators, and you are about to make maybe one of the toughest decisions in your translating career. What do people expect you to do? Not translate this? Or what, just silently put whatever this thing is out onto the internet without any commentary? Yep, this is the moment everyone's waiting for. What about the stage play? This is kind of what's been dominating Kanaka talk since it happened over a year ago. Kanaka just started going mask off while writing this anniversary stage play for Digimon. Honestly, it's not too big of a surprise knowing Kanaka's writing tendencies. It's not like it was a secret. Obviously, I'm kind of making an assumption that his writings reflect his own beliefs, but if that's the case, this guy does not trust the government. He's a very paranoid person. Government conspiracies show up in a lot of his works, even his older stuff like Armitage III. So it's not too much of a surprise that he kind of fell down this rabbit hole. I guess the question most people have is like, why now, you know? Why'd you have to get Terriermon involved in this? I'm not really trying to put Kanaka and Lovecraft in any kind of comparison. I mean, these are different events in different times. If Lovecraft saw a picture of Leomon, he would probably have night terrors, you know? But I don't know, it's interesting how there are these similarities. Maybe I look at Kanaka the same way he looks at Lovecraft. Or maybe not, maybe he doesn't even care at all, he just rolls with it, I don't know. Nakamura's early career is probably the one that I would say trends the most conventional, in a way that like most people would expect. He started out doing key animation on a lot of prestige projects at Madhouse and TMS. Okay, listen. I was gonna do this like bit where like I give a funny example instead of an obvious one of some kind of foundational production, where it'd be like, oh, I didn't know he worked on that, you know? And so of course, if you look at the stuff he's worked on, the obvious pick I think would be that you would look at the Fantastic Adventures of Unico and like, okay, yeah, that's funny and stuff. But then I like watched it and like, what is going on here? You know, like I was floored. Not even 10 minutes in, and I knew like, look at this ocean, look at this framing, you know? And these are like shots in the first 20 minutes, and like I can't even break down like Baron the Ghost. He has this like hold over the movie when he's on screen. Every film element like exists to serve him. It's incredible. Unico kills him. Anyways, Nakamura was also another hire on the Lain project. He was working as a freelance director at the time. He did a lot of work on the series though. He's credited as the director, but he also did a lot of storyboard and continuity work on the series. He definitely had a big hand in how the series looks as a whole. And same as Abe and Kanaka, working on Lain really rocket propelled these careers. Nakamura started working on a lot of prestige projects afterwards. Kino's Journey is probably the most prolific example, but as it relates to this video, there is a more like key example. The Masamune Shiro created Ghost Town with Nakamura directing and Kanaka writing, and it's safe to say that if you're looking for the two people working in contemporary anime that have the most ideas, then they are here in this show. I have not heard a single person talk about Ghost Town without me bringing it up first. It has an interesting premise, and the blocking and the direction are fantastic. The sound design is incredible. But then as for like the actual meat of the series, it's kind of odd.
この辺りがブローカやで、ここら辺がウェルニッケや言葉を司る部位。ホムンクルスだっけ?
There are so many threads and ideas being tossed around that it can be hard to keep these things in check, you know? Especially when the series itself kind of changes what it is. The series like goes through these different modes over the course of its runtime, you know? As the series starts off, it really plays into the supernatural mystery, but as the narrative web kind of expands and more ideas are folded into the series, it becomes like this weird political thriller tragedy, you know, like everybody's making these moves, and because of it, like things start to fall apart, you know? And then the Shiro and Kanaka DNA begins to ferment, and we start falling into these really well-tread ideas again. Government conspiracy, transhumanism, religion. And I just think it's too much for the series to bear, which is a shame. I actually really like a lot of things about Ghost Town. Is there another piece of animated media where someone processes their traumatic past with the power of jazz guitar? And Kei's story, circling back to Kanaka's writing women issue, starts out as like this really interesting subplot that spans the whole series until, you know, they ruin it. But that's like, maybe the DS game adaptation can right the wrongs of the series. But I can't read this. 2009, Abe announced during a panel at SakuraCon that he was developing an anime with Chiaki J. Kanaka and Nakamura tapped to direct. This is it, you know, we're getting the band back together for the first time. The big three are working together again all at once. Despera, set in Japan 1 year prior to the Kanto earthquake of 1923, still has not been released. So, Ryotaro Nakamura was fighting pancreatic cancer. It's not public knowledge how long he had been fighting it or when he received his diagnosis. Obviously, that's not really anyone's business but him and his family. But in 2010, production went on hold for the sake of Nakamura's health, and in 2013, Nakamura passed away. He was 58 years old. I don't know Nakamura. I can't really eulogize for this guy. It would be insincere to even try, but I can say, the more that I've watched the things he's worked on, the things he's directed, the more I can maybe see what he brought to the most impactful art pieces I've ever engaged with. And I mean, I'm grateful, I guess, is all I can really say about it. So is Despera just on hold forever? Kinda, it's complicated. Kanaka wrote a light novel adaptation. Is it an adaptation if it's not out? With Abe doing the artwork, and Abe has released art books with illustrations from that light novel. And just being real, some of them are like really stunning. And as of like 6 months ago, there's a complete English translation of the light novel. I haven't touched it yet, actually. I got kind of impatient with this video. I'm gonna get to it. I'll get to it as soon as this is done. And as for the anime, they say that they've been working on it for a long time. And as of making this video, the last update was in March 2021. And a lot of things have happened since then. So it's hard to say what's gonna happen to the series. Okay. This video is it's just completely overblown in scope. It's the ghost town of YouTube videos, some would say. I'm not even really sure what it was originally about. I think it might have just been about Technolize, and it wasn't really about the people who were making it. But now, it's about like 10 different projects and how Ueda came up with some of the coolest young talent for his weird series that he wanted to make, and how cool it was that Abe got to write his own series and really show how his art can work in conversation with his own writing. How Nakamura has had a hand in so many incredible contemporary works in animation, and how even the bad stuff he's worked on is better off for having him on the team, and how Kanaka probably doesn't think too much about how fans of his work will have to rethink their relationship to him as a creator. And I apologize. I just couldn't bear to chop this video into little pieces because I feel like the picture I'm seeing is just so big, and I just feel the need to present it this way or it'll drive me crazy. But more than anything, more than Lovecraft and Digimon and Despera and even Lain, this video, more than anything, is about CGI gacked.